In Lafitte, Louisiana, life is shaped by the water, the seasons, and the people who live by them. This is the story of Edward and Muriel Perrin, a story told through their children, their memories, and a lifetime built together on the bayou. But before there was a family, before there was a classroom, and before there was a legacy, there was a small boy growing up in the marsh.
I was born on April 15, 1934, Lafitte, Louisiana. My parents lived in Lafitte. My father was a trapper, and we would stay in Lafitte for about 7 months. We'd leave Lafitte approximately the 1st of October, and we would stay in a camp on the trapping grounds until the 1st of March. So as far as schooling was concerned, we didn't go to school for about 5 months. My father would trap. We would come home once during that 5 months, and that was on Christmas Eve. We'd stay in Lafitte with my grandparents for about a day, and then we'd go back in a camp. My father was a trapper. He would trap with about 500 traps, caught anywhere from maybe 150 to 200 muskrats a day, and that was their job, to skin and dry those pelts. Most people think of Lafitte as a fishing community, but at the very beginning, my great-grandparents, they were farmers. Their main crop was okra and cucumbers, because that wasn't perishable. And there was a freight boat that would come and pick up the okra and the cucumbers maybe once a week. And later on, when they were able to refrigerate, in other words, they were able to ice up the shrimp, they then became fishermen. But they also, Lafitte people were very resistant, because they trawled for about 3 or 4 months. Then they went into the trapping camps for about five months. And then when they came back home in the spring, they were crab fishermen after that. My father died when I was about 7 years old. And from that time on, I lived with my grandparents and my mother. As far as education, as I said before, we're in the trapping camps, we didn't have any schooling for about 5 months. So the schooling had to take place within about 3 or 4 months. That's about all we attended.
With little schooling and no father to guide him, Edward learned early how to survive. But he would soon find something, and someone that would change the direction of his life.
My first memory of Ed, I'll tell you my first memory of Ed. I was on a school bus on a 4-H trip, and he was in the back of the bus talking to the girls from Aurora, and had telling them a lie, that he had never seen a soft-shell crab. And that's my first memory of Edward Perrin. I knew of him because my good friend Madeline, he was good friend with Madeline's brother, Floyd. So she spoke about him often, but I had never met him until we was on that school bus on this voyage.
Believe it or not, she lived on one side of the bayou, and I lived on the other side of the bayou. But that was a long distance in those days. But with Muriel, my first recollection of Muriel, we used to, in Lafitte, we had dance halls. We used to go to the dance. And the dances were mostly with a band, was on a Saturday night. And then on Sunday evenings, we used to have the jukebox. And she came to Lafitte with one of our friends, and I saw her next to the jukebox. And when I looked at her, and I knew she was the one I was going to marry. And that was it. So as she said, we had a very short period of time.
He went off to Fort Hood in June, and when he came back, we were married in November. Not very long. Not very long. He also took me to my senior prom, and back then we had to cross the Wagner Bridge, and of course he was late. So I held up graduation, because Everett was late picking me up. You think I would turn and run the other direction, right? but I didn't.
Together, Edward and Muriel built a life, not just for themselves, but for the children who would grow up along the bayou.
Going back to the earliest memories of growing up with mom and dad in we call it the old house, the house that they originally lived in when they got married. And Helen and I are only 14 months apart, so we always had each other. And our memories, like mama was always busy inside. Daddy was at work, either shrimping or teaching school. And when Grandpa Yin, he would watch us, but he would watch us fish by the bayou. And so we would fish all day long with just a cane pole, and we would catch mullets. And they don't even have mullets in the bayou anymore. And we would catch those big mullets, a basket full of mullets, and little girls, 4 and 5 years old, catching all of these mullets. And then we would take the mullets and cut the mullets and use it as crab bait. And then we would fish with the string and the net and fish crabs. That's how we played and entertained. And Yin was the one watching us. And he was always afraid and fussed that we was gonna fall in the bayou and that kind of stuff. We had always big parties at my mom and them's little house. We had Christmas and Thanksgiving there. And literally they would put the dining room table through the doorway. And then if you needed something that was in the kitchen side, you had to walk outside to go around you couldn't go through the door. You had to go outside to come around. So the two tables were like into the living room, into the kitchen, but through the door. But if you wanted salt and pepper that was on the other table, you had to walk outside, get it, and then come back around. And they always had a big annual party every year for the Pirogue Race, because the Pirogue Race was right there by Goose Bayou. And all of my daddy's friends and the family friends, we had a yard. We probably had 100 people or more. And it was walking distance to be able to go to the tavern. And it was the once a year that as little girls, they let us walk that far to go watch the Pirogue races. And then ironically, I married Gary, and his uncle was the Pirogue champion. So full circle around, here we come, the Perrin family and the LeBlanc family incorporated together with the world's champion Pirogue race. And it was like hundreds and hundreds of people. We had plenty good memories, and it was always involved family and friends, and we had good times. My mom's claim to history is, as a young girl in high school and stuff, my mom was always like with the home ec class and 4-H. She was a big participant in the 4-H club, and she did the sewing. And so when she did the sewing, she won a contest, and the prize was a trip to Cuba. So it was when Cuba was still free, that people could travel to and from. And she said she thinks about that now, how her mama allowed her to go to Cuba. And then not long after that was with the revolution and all of, problems with Cuba and everything. So she was in a newspaper with her story about going to Cuba. So Daddy played baseball for LSU, and Mama was a traveler that went to Cuba.
One thing that I'm grateful for my daddy is that he taught me to love this place, everything about it. I fished since I was young. He drug us in a pirogue up and down the canals by the camp. We built camps. It seems like I fished every day of my life as a child. But one story that really stands out, Easter Sunday. They went fishing. The girls couldn't go, which kind of upset me, of course. Anyway, comes home. They got all these big redfish and drumfish. And he tells us, take them by Herman Adam, the store next door, and go weigh them. All dressed in our little Easter outfits and everything. Slime all over us. Bring them over there, weigh them up, bring them back. My mama was furious. But it made me love that fishing even more. It was like I've never turned my back to where I live. I love it. I love everything about it. I was looking for pictures of me and Daddy. Everything is fishing, and the outdoors. And I thank you for that.
Hi, I'm Catherine. I'm the middle child, but they don't even let me become the middle child Helen claims she's the middle because we were the first original three. And Eddie and Karen, they just came afterwards. So I don't even get to be the middle child. Oh yeah, and the middle child is just forgotten about. But now since I live away, when I come, they say, oh, it's a big deal. Catherine's coming, Mama's cooking. So it's good. You know, memories of my dad, since I moved away in 92, it's so nice to come back and sit with him, you know, across the table and drink our coffee and listen to all the stories that he still tells. He was always a teacher, always taught me, and still teaching me to today. My earliest memory of my dad, trawling in his boat, sitting on that little stool, and here comes a game warden. Pulls up next to us, steps over me, tries to make me laugh, and I won't laugh. And of course, we're trawling illegally in Plaquemine Parish. So then my mom and dad had to drag all four of us to the Plaquemine Parish courthouse for my dad to go to trial. And we walked the levee with my mom. I think she was pregnant and with my little sister at the time. So it was like so devastating to me because they kept saying, you might have to go in as a witness since you were there. But of course he got off and we all went home, happy big family.
I was one of his last classes he taught before he retired. Like all of us, we had him for science. And the year, my ninth grade year, at that point, I had 6 relatives as teachers. So needless to say, I couldn't get away with anything. I was the bad one. But in a classroom as a teacher, he taught us without even realizing he was teaching us. He would bring it into reality and things that we would understand. If we didn't want to know anything that day or do anything that day, we would get the boys to start talking about hunting, and then they would go off on a tangent, and then we wouldn't have to do any work that day. But it was quite interesting having him as a teacher. You know, you go through the formality of, do you call him Dad or do you call him Mr. Perrin? You know, and it was always a funny thing that kids would make fun of, but it was like, I couldn't call, they all knew he was my dad. There was no way I wasn't going to call him Dad, you know. But I would sit in the front of the class and try not to be bad, but all the guys in the class would always end up making us, we had a bad class. That's why he retired. But it was fun. He enjoyed what he did for a living, and it showed. And I think the way people talk about him as we get older and how much he taught them, not just in the classroom, but about life and self, and about how some people finish college because of him and what he did as far as his drive, and make them realize that you could do it. I mean, my dad and I are 30 years apart. He actually graduated college when my mom was pregnant. So, but had taught years before. It was before you needed the actual degree. So he retired at a young age, but taught for many years. And he has touched a lot of people in that. So that was one of the things I'm most proud of, that I was very glad and blessed that he was able to teach me. And I was able to experience that. Not too many people can say that.
Not a lot of people know that my dad grew up basically an orphan. You know, we got this huge family, and everybody just thinks that it was always dad and all that kind of stuff like that. But it starts with, the two, my mom and my dad. And my dad, like I said, grew up at about 5 years old. I don't know, maybe a little old. I'm not remember exactly, but no parents, living with the grandparents, living with aunts. And then, he goes through school, bounces around the city, he gets all this experience, meets all these nice people in the city. And then he meets my mom, and then you got the Pisani side of the family, which is huge. And it brings this, this big family oriented, it brings it all together. So then it basically, I guess it like roots my dad, into this family-oriented thing that he's passed on to us. And then I take that pretty deep. And then the next thing is everybody, of course, he's 92, my mom's, 90 or something like that. And it's like, how do you live that long and all that kind of stuff like that. And then it's not, I always say, it's like my dad lives by the seasons. It's like, it's not winter, spring, fall. It's, duck hunting season, of course. And then it's, trawling season. The crabs are biting. The berries are ripe, ready to be picked. And then it's like life just goes on. It just trucks along like that. So that's one of those, that's what my take is, as far as for a little bit I've thought about it and wanted to put out there. Yeah, we live by, it's like, it's a cool way to grow up, especially living down here. It was just amazing.
We're proud of our children, but we're really proud of our extended children, the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren, because they've all, done well. They've all finished high school at least, and went on to college, and they've held some pretty good, into pretty good professions. We've had some that stayed on, in-laws and stuff, that stayed on as fishermen on the bayou, and they were very good fishermen, and we're very proud of our family.
We have 14 grandchildren and 29 great-grandfathers, which is a cruise.
And if you come here tomorrow, you'll see the whole gang.
Most done.
Most of them.
Most done. Then we're going to renew our vows tomorrow. The first time in 70 years, we're going to renew our vows. So.
From a boy in the marsh, to a man in the classroom, to a family that spans generations, Edward and Muriel Perrin built a life defined by love, resilience, and tradition. And through their children, their story lives on.
You're celebrating your 70th anniversary.
Right.
Today.
Not today.
Tomorrow.
You still in love with them?
I wouldn't have it no other way. It's been a good run.